I was only 16 years old back then. The mad old man and his strange stories are what I missed the most about the small village. He used to obstruct our path and claimed that on the forbidden mountain lurked a cannibal fox, hungry for our flesh. He was just so annoying to me. Although I was curious about the mountain and the story of the crazy man, I thought it was nonsense at that time, but then something happened that completely altered my perspective. I was unlucky enough to be caught by the supervisor while fighting with Kento that time. We were fined for composing a 100-page self-critique statement. Of course, a few sheets of paper are insufficient to resolve the inconsistencies between two children. I recall Kento throwing a note to me at 10 p.m. on the Forbidden Mountain for a battle while I was writing the review. So as I promised to Kento, I snuck out after my parents were fast asleep to go to the rendezvous location. Because I was afraid of being seen, I chose a smaller, quieter path to take, and the only thing I had with me was a flashlight. Despite the fact that the night was dark and there was no light and the forest was deserted, I walked inside without hesitation. After walking for a while, I noticed a ray of light shining directly at me. Then there were the terrifying growls. My heart was racing and cold sweat was dripping from my brow. However, such a brave child as myself was able to regain his composure very quickly. After calming down, I began looking around with my flashlight. Then I discovered that ahead of me was a deep abyss that could not be traversed any further. At that moment, the growling resounded once more. I quickly flashed the light at the source of the noise, but my heart was racing with fear. That ray of light reappeared beneath the dense forest with a strange attraction. I had no idea why, but I was curious as to what it was. With that in mind, I stretched my muscles and prepared to chase the light. While I was distracted, that ray of light that had somehow gotten closer. Fearlessly, I pointed my finger in that direction and exclaimed, "You! Step back for me!" However, after my yell, that light not only didn't stop, but also fled. Of course, I immediately pursued with ferocious zeal. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure why I did it. I ran as fast as I could, sweat pouring down my sleeve, but I couldn't keep up. When I came to a halt, I found myself in a strange location with no one around. Not only that, the surrounding air was also strangely murky and cold. Fortunately, after walking for a while, I discovered a lot of lights. Thinking it was the light from the village, I dashed over without a second's hesitation. But as I got closer, I noticed a lovely scene with lanterns and cherry blossom petals blowing in the wind. Despite the fact that it was a strange world, I couldn't figure out why this place felt so familiar to me. Instead of returning to the same road, I continued forward and came across a large stele blocking in the middle of the road. There were strange words written on the stele, and even though I tried to read them, I couldn't figure out what they meant. I then walked around the stele, taking few more steps. I became enthralled by the scenery ahead. What was in front of me was like a peach blossom party from one of my grandmother's fairy tales, with fairies and elders dressed in traditional attire. Curiosity compelled me to go inside once more, but unexpectedly, the small sound of my footsteps drew the attention of everyone at the party. Everyone was staring at me with a pale face and strangely frightening soulless eyes. That made me a bit nervous. Sweat began to form on my brow, and my heart pounded with anxiety. At that precise moment, a warm voice rang out. The person speaking to me was a man with a striking appearance and eyes that seemed to contain a strangely appealing light. I didn't have time to react when I found myself sitting at the banquet table with such a feast in front of me. Even though I hadn't fully recovered consciousness, The man sitting next to me put his arm around my shoulders and invited me to join him for a drink. I've never had an alcoholic beverage before. Right now, the situation was awkward. I couldn't drink, but couldn't refuse either. While I was hesitating, unsure what to do, the woman in front of me spoke up. She provoked me to drink. The woman's provocation instantly piqued the pride of a fearless adolescent like me, so I drained the entire glass of wine in my hand. However, the taste of this wine was strange, not as tasty as my father used to say. It had a particularly unpleasant odor. Everyone burst out laughing when they saw my reaction. I stood up and left the table, embarrassed and angry. Despite the fact that the woman made me lose face, I had the impression she was very familiar. Instead of leaving, I returned to borrow the phone from that group in order to call my family. When I turned around, I noticed the woman sitting in her seat, happily chatting with the young man next to her. But it was the trekking backpack beside them that drew my attention, not the two of them. There were bloodstain-like red marks on the backpack. They must have encountered some difficulties along the way. As I stared at those red marks, a thought occurred to me. That's right. Her. Exactly that face. That woman was featured in the news a few days ago. According to the station's information, she died while climbing the mountain with a group of friends. So what's the deal? As I witnessed a terrifying scene in front of me, my face darkened and my lips pursed tightly, trying not to scream. The food on the table had turned to stone, insects, and even maggots, and it was disgusting. And the two normal people had now transformed into two dry skeletons dressed in rags. I started vomiting after seeing the scene in front of me and recalling the glass of wine I had earlier. A hand with a towel and a warm voice appeared again at that moment. "Are you all right, boy?" Because I saw a human hand, I accepted the towel with ease, but when I looked up, I was so terrified that my face turned pale. There was now no delicate face in front of me with lovely eyes, but a fox in human form. Terrified, I pushed him aside immediately and ran away with all my strength. There also disappeared the beautiful scenery of the lamps and cherry blossoms, replaced by an odd and gloomy cold. I was afraid. My legs didn't stop running. I closed my eyes while running and prayed quietly. Unfortunately, I trickled over a big tree root because it was night and in the dense forest. I rushed forward disorientated and crashed my head into a nearby tree. I couldn't remember anything after that. I was lying in my own room when I opened my eyes. And next to me was my mother with a glass of warm milk. According to my mother, Kento found me unconscious under a tree in the forest. I hadn't woken up yet. No matter how he shaked or called, seeing that, he had no alternative but to carry me home. I breathed a sigh of relief when I heard this. It was a nightmare to think about everything that happened yesterday. It made me feel better that I didn't get scolded by my mum because I had snuck out that night and took a day off from school. But just when I was leaning over, I felt like I had something in my pocket. When my hand reached out and I found a handkerchief, my face again darkened. Thinking about it, I jumped out of bed and ran into the village to find the madman. Perhaps about this nine-tailed fox he would know something. But different from his usual appearance, when he saw the handkerchief, his whole body trembled, full of fear. He only murmured in his mouth extremely strange words instead of answering my question. "Demon! He's back!" Then he told me to take the towel back to the mountain or a demon would come to the village. A thick black smoke came out of the prohibited mountain after I threw the towel back. After that Kenta always baited me because when I walked into that forbidden mountain, I was scared to death. However, I didn't care, because I knew that there was a fox elf in that forest, that fearsome cannibal.